I think that my appreciation is growing the more I stop trying. And then, finally, I've saved the chunkiest for last. We have Forgotten Gialli Volume 6.
Il lupo mannaro.
Ogni omicidio ha un movente.
Includes the films Death Carries a Cane, Naked You Die, and The Bloodstained Shadow. We have this lovely sort of trademark Vinegar Syndrome box with the, what do you even call it? Like the topless box, perhaps? And then you have your individual discs in it. I must confess, as cool as this is, I kind of wish that the standard edition was just available, because what they do is instead of all of this taking up shelf space, they consolidate it into just one of these cases. And I don't need all that extra artwork and shit. I don't know. I'm really at a point where space is at a premium, so that's just where I'm at. But, you know, you get more artwork inside here, which is always fun. It's a cool idea. It's just not particularly kind to shelf space. So let's just go in order. The first one we have is Death Carries a Cane.
Vedi, oh, ma quella è la ragazza tua?
Che?
Sì,
Ragazza mia,
With this fucking sick ass artwork. Really just quintessential classic Gialli stuff going on here, or Giallo stuff going on right here. You got the black glove and the blade and, you know, slicing up a nice young woman. Pretty par for the course stuff. Now, if you watch my Forgotten Gialli Volume 5 review, you'll know that I wasn't the biggest fan of that box set, and I'm also just not the biggest fan of this genre. If you're not familiar, just the briefest TLDR or whatever is that Giallo films are essentially like detective films meet slashers. I'm sure a lot of purists out there just shuddered at my characterization.
This is Giallo, it's something difficult to explain.
But like, that's what it is. It's like really bloody, slashery, like mystery killer elements with like a murder mystery, right? So it's just like a sleazier version of like detective stories, essentially. And a lot of the times I feel like we focus a lot on that detective element, and it's not just that I'm a fucking freak who just wants to see the blood and the nudity and everything else, right? But it's just that a lot of the times those detective characters just aren't that interesting, and Giallo films have this tendency to want to be as elaborate as possible and as fucking like they put such a premium on keeping you guessing and getting a big twist at the end, to the point where it becomes very difficult to follow and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think that my appreciation is growing the more I stop trying to make sense of anything that happens in these films and just sort of soak in the vibes, you know? Like by the end of it, the killer is revealed and I don't know who that is or what that means, but I don't really care because I got there through the vibes, you know? And I wasn't like trying to make everything make sense or piece everything together. That might be my biggest piece of advice to anybody who's struggling to get into this genre, because as we'll get into, I really enjoyed this box set and I think it kind of is helping me get there. But it's because I'm just letting the on-location photography and the murder sequences and the cinematography and just all these other things like be enough in and of themselves, and I'm not it's kind of ironic. I feel like you kind of have to not put as much stock into the detective story as the script does. At least for me, that's how I garner appreciation of these films, which honestly doesn't sound great when you say it like that, but that's sort of where I am with these, because there's just so many of them and they're so popular and they keep coming out, and I keep trying with them, and I think I've kind of figured out a way to enjoy them. Or alternatively, somehow they just threw together 3 films that I really happen to like in a genre I don't like. So that strikes me as less likely, but you know. This is a thematic box set, I'll say that. This is sort of focused on, and maybe this is part of what I liked about this, now that I'm thinking about it, but I think the idea here was to do like an amateur detective box like as opposed to the police proper. Like the people leading these investigations are just like regular people who take it upon themselves to figure things out, which I guess is generally more interesting if you can't write good police characters, right? Anyway, setting all that aside, Death Carries a Cane is very standard stuff, and it is definitely guilty of the sort of stuff I'm talking about, where by the end, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And like, I don't know, the killer was revealed and I was like, that means nothing to me. I don't really even remember who that is. But it didn't really matter because, to be honest with you, like the people solving the case, I thought were really fun to watch and really just interesting characters. And the main thing is I thought the cinematography was gorgeous. Like you just have this really beautiful period-specific photography of Italy and some really interesting camera work backing it up. And that was enough for me, honestly. Like the detective story was kind of fun as it was plodding along. There's a sequence where they attempted to bait the killer with like a fake sex worker sort of thing, and that's an entertaining scene and everything. And there's also just like vignettes of sleaziness and nudity and sensuality that don't really need to be there for any reasons other than aesthetics, which, as we've established, has been enough for me to enjoy this film. And so, yeah, that's really kind of it. I don't have a ton else to say about it other than that I found it really entertaining, really beautiful to look at, and I don't know, by the time I was done with this one, I was like, I might be sold on this whole Giallo thing. Like, that was pretty nice. I liked that, you know? And I didn't give a shit about the plot, and I was okay with that, you know? So I landed on a 7 out of 10 for Death Carries a Cane, and then let's briefly go through the supplements here. So first you have an interview with the editor, Eugenio Alabiso. It's a decent interview, just kind of going over his whole career. The kind of surprising, he edited a lot of the major works from Sergio Leone, so, you know, you got to hear anecdotes about working with him, and, you know, you kind of had a big get in this interview. Like, he's not being interviewed for the good, the bad, and the ugly, but he did edit it, you know, so it's a cool interview for sure. And then you have the commentary with our boys, Eugenio Ercolani, Troy Howarth, and Nathaniel Thompson. It's a good commentary. There is one section where they clearly can't hear each other, and so they are fully giving out entire anecdotes or analyses like on top of each other, and that was not super fun to listen to, but it's just some kind of recording mistake, I imagine. They kind of agree that the ending doesn't make any sense at all. And with these kind of films, you kind of just have to decide early on if you're okay with it. And I think it took me too long to get there. You know, like that was really validating to hear that like the experts in this film and in this genre got to the end of that and they were like, I don't get it. That doesn't make any sense. At that point, I felt like it wasn't a me problem and I could just be like, you know what? Maybe it doesn't have to make sense. Maybe it doesn't have to be super logical. And I can just be like, whatever, that's the guy. Like it's kind of a MacGuffin. Like, and the real treat, the real Giallo was the shots we got to look at along the way, right? I don't fucking know what I'm talking about. Okay. Next we have Naked You Die.
Il lupo mannaro.
Now, that sounds like a super salacious title, and especially with the sort of reputation of this genre, I feel like you think you're going to be getting into some pretty sleazy shit. But this is actually a very early entry in the Giallo where the tropes hadn't yet been established, and I think it was marketed to be a lot sleazier than it is because it's really not. Like, there's a little bit of nudity, there's obviously a lot of killing happening, but like, I don't know, it's not like really nasty, and it's not like really sexy either. Like, it's pretty tame, honestly. And like, I kind of figured that out kind of early when we open with a shower murder scene and they kind of go out of their way to cover up any nudity. Like, it doesn't fully succeed, like you do see stuff, but it's like, there's a different way you would have shot this if that's what you were going for, you know? And so, I don't know, I was kind of like, I don't think it's going to be that type of movie early on. And it essentially follows a women's boarding school, and people start turning up dead, and, you know, the girls kind of have to figure out what's going on and who's doing this, and, I don't know. I thought that they had like really like they were all really good characters and they had nice camaraderie, and I liked the setting. I liked some of the goofier like male characters that are a part of the staff. I don't know. Again, like there's not a ton happening here, but I'm just kind of enjoying it and I'm along for the ride. And the ending, I will say, even though it is a little bit annoying, and I sort of clocked what was happening early on, it's not as annoying as it could have been, and I was kind of okay with it when it was fully explained and everything. And there are way more egregious offenders of this sort of thing. So, and you know what? The ending made sense. It made logical sense. The character motivation made sense, and I was like, cool. We got that far at least. Yeah, I don't know. This is just a fun film to watch. Like, there's some interesting kills, and there's some goofy characters, and sort of overwrought score. And it was actually written by Mario Bava, so I guess that explains why I think the script is fairly decent. But yeah, I think I landed on a 6 out of 10 for this one, but you know, it's like a strong 6, and it's something that I would revisit in the future, and I did enjoy a decent amount. So let's mosey on over to the features. Fucking stop it. Okay, first we have an interview with the actress Sally Smith. She spoke very highly about the director, like just had the nicest things to say about him. And she says that when they shot on the Spanish Steps, originally in her original costume, she stopped traffic because the shorts she was wearing were so short that people driving beside the steps could see up them, and like it became a safety hazard. Kind of a flex, right? She also said that she had a very voluptuous figure at the time. I mean, I guess she's already established that, right? But she said that when they did the shot where she like climbs up the pool ladder and kind of ascends from the pool, they had to immediately like call cut and then like pad her suit with foam to like iron out or even out some of her curves. But of course the foam like soaked with water and like was spilling out of her when she stepped out of the pool. I don't know, it was just a fun interview with some bizarre anecdotes. Next is an interview with the actress Eleanor Brown. She also had wonderful things to say about the director. I guess this was a pretty decent guy. And she said that she was an animal lover and like on principle doesn't go to the zoos or the circus. Didn't say if she was vegan though, so you know, maybe reconsider that. Or maybe be better, I don't know. I'm being a bitch, I'm sorry. And so, you know, one of the characters has like a room of like pinned up insects and beetles and shit, and apparently that was very upsetting for her. There's also an interview with the actress Marissa Longo, and then there is a video essay by Mike Foster, who runs a YouTube channel called In Defense Of, which is kind of hard to find if you're just searching that. But I'll try to link it below, actually. This is on in a video essay on the early films of the Giallo. This is very easily one of the best video essays to come out so far this year, and like maybe one of my favorite ones I've ever watched. Like, I'm calling that now. Shelf Shock watch. Keep an eye out, because it's that good. It's just such an incredible analysis on how genres are formed and how they evolve. He also talks about just how necessary the early films in a genre are, like the ones that are establishing tropes rather than relying on them. And like how quickly that happens. Like he kind of looks at the Friday the 13th franchise and how by entry 3, all of the pre-established slasher tropes are there. Bam, bam, bam. Like, you know what you're going to get. But the first two, I think a lot of people revisit them with the hindsight of those tropes that they helped establish. And when it's not exactly the tropes that they're expecting, like they're kind of confused or disappointed, which was kind of my experience watching Friday the 13th as a teenager. Yeah, it's just something I had never really thought about in this way, and it's just such a good video essay, and it's also fucking funny. Like, it is so hilarious. Like, I've laughed out loud of like a good amount of times watching this. Just a really dry sense of humor that creeps up on you a bit. And the essay specifically focuses on the Giallo films that came out between Blood and Black Lace, which is sort of the inception of the genre, and The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which is like the cemented popularization of the genre, where like the tropes are established, this is what people are expecting going forward. There's that interesting gray area in between that's sort of establishing tropes and playing with some semi-established tropes and not really working in an established genre yet, but clearly is a part of that tradition. And so these films came out specifically between 1968 and 1969. Next, we have a video essay by Pier Maria Bocci on the lesser-known films of the director Antonio Margheriti. It's a good career overview of his films, like both his films that were marketed to America and to Italy, and kind of comparing and contrasting how that marketing played out for those two different types of films. It's also really well edited. And then finally, you know what's coming up. Commentary track by our boys, Eugenio Ercolani, Troy Howarth, and Nathaniel Thompson. It's just really great, entertaining, and informative as always. It dove into how it's just really not a super edgy film, despite its marketing. Just generally because it's not quite at the point in cinema history where they can go full hog, full sleaze with it, you know? Let's talk about how the theme song is a blatant ripoff of the original Batman theme. Which somehow I missed. And then when they said it, I was like, duh, that's what it is. And then finally, we have the Bloodstained Shadow. With one of my favorite posters of all time, I think. Like, that shit is hard as fuck. Essentially, this film deals with a man. I'm not like trying to remember what happens. I'm trying to be careful about what I should or shouldn't say to give you the best experience going into it. It's about a guy who goes to visit his brother, who is a Catholic priest. He goes to visit him. He meets a girl on the train on the way there, and they start a sort of romance. And his brother is sort of talking about how the sin and the vice of the city has kind of gotten out of control. It's in Venice, by the way. And like he kind of focuses on this like coven of people that's like giving out illicit abortions and doing witchcraft, and there's also a pedophile. So like I don't love that we're grouping in all those people together, but I guess it's fair and it's interesting in that in the eyes of the priest, these are all on the same level of moral culpability, and there's an interesting idea in that, right? But then you start to see that somebody is targeting the priest since he's calling out these people. And I won't say anything past that because it takes some really, really interesting turns. And this was easily my favorite of the set. And maybe one of my favorite Giallo films I've ever seen. I just think it's really fucking good, honestly. It's hard to make a bad looking film if you're shooting in Venice, but this one looks really, really good. It just looks gorgeous. And like, I actually did have the old 88 Films Blu-ray of this that I never got the chance to watch. And so I did a quick comparison, and like the restoration is pretty night and day. Like it makes a big difference. And like that Blu-ray didn't look bad. Like it still is a beautiful looking film, but like the restoration really takes it to the next level, and it's just gorgeous. Yeah, beyond that, without getting into spoilers, there are some really fascinating and subversive themes going on here that really challenge existing power structures, especially in Italy. And I really, really appreciated that. Didn't really see it coming, and I think it's really fucking cool. It's a bit on the long side, I will say that. Like there's maybe some tangents that don't need to be there. It could maybe be trimmed a little bit, but I don't know. Overall, it looks great. It has a really compelling story. It has some really interesting and compelling themes and important themes, I'd say, as well. And yeah, I don't know. This kind of just worked for me on really every level, and I highly recommend it. Kind of wish it wasn't in this set. I think it is good enough to have it, and I think it's popular enough too to have its own standalone release. This was a film, I mean, I already had it in my collection, and I'd heard of it, of course, when it was announced, so I was a little bit surprised by that. Yeah, I think that's it in terms of the film itself. I'd give it a really strong 7 out of 10. I thought I gave it an 8. When I look back, I gave it a 7, so you know, it might be bumped up to an 8 on a rewatch, but the bottom line is that I really, really enjoyed it. And I think that this would be a good one for people who aren't into this genre, who are maybe looking to start somewhere that's not quite as ridiculous or as tropey with these things. Yeah, personally, I think this would go well in a Giallo starter pack. So first, we have our commentary track with our boys, Eugenio, Troy, and Nathaniel. It's great as always, although I will say that Troy doesn't seem to like the film as much as I do, which I thought was a bit interesting. He seems to put it in that sort of forgotten tier, or that sort of lower category tier. as like a B movie in this sort of genre, as opposed to like a classic. Which, granted, I'm not the expert here, but it felt like it was on par with like those really bulletproof Argento films to me. Yeah, this one was pretty loaded up. Next, we have an interview with the director, Antonio Bito. It's a really good and really long and comprehensive interview about his career and his directorial style and philosophy. I mean, the thing's like 52 minutes long or something, so there's a lot of information in there. But the bit that I thought was funny was when he was kind of doing a humble brag, where he was like, I probably shouldn't even say this. You can cut this out if you want to. But reviews at the time said that I was better than Dario Argento. Like, okay, but it was just funny. Next was an interview with the screenwriter, Melissa Ondolo, who is actually also the director's wife. She kind of discussed her work on the film and said that the scene where they're out on the boat, like one of the more romantic scenes, where the protagonist and his girlfriend are just kind of having fun, like tubing. She says it's terrible and they should cut it out. But she does say that the sex scene is really good. You win some, you lose some. Next, so these next few interviews are by the director, and I don't know, you can definitely tell he's a little bit full of himself, but that's okay, right? We love a confident king, right? As an interview with the actress Stefania Cassini. This one felt just a tiny bit uncomfortable because he just like talked a lot about how much nudity she does and like all the nudity she did in his films, and like asked her to recall her nude scenes and stuff, but she seemed comfortable with it, so you know, it's probably fine. Anyway, he asked her about her nude scenes, and he brought up the one where she jacks off Robert De Niro. I won't say what film that is in case it's a spoiler, but it is something she did on camera, which is pretty cool. I don't know how many people get to say that, probably just her. But she says she never had a problem with all the nudity in her films because, like, she considers herself a feminist and, like, she gets to decide what she wants to do with her body, and she doesn't see anything wrong with, like, being erotic or showing a naked body. You know what I mean? Like, just wasn't really, is a non-issue for her. And she also says that she never considered herself to be particularly erotic because she has a smaller chest and thus feels as though she is androgynous. I'd like to go ahead and push back a little bit on the idea that androgyny cannot be correlated with eroticism, or that androgyny is in and of itself unerotic. Some of us might disagree with that assertion, or that characterization. Next, he interviews the actor Lino... Oh, Jesus. Capoluccio? Sounds like a coffee drink, but that's my best guess. He said something that I thought was really interesting, where he says that generally, when he shoots thrillers and horror films, the vibes on set are like actually very low tension and very like pretty generally happy and like positive, whereas when he shoots comedies, the sets are like very tense and like getting everything right is like way more, there's like way more friction on these sets, and he like enjoys making like that's counterintuitive, and you would think the opposite, but he enjoys making the thrillers way more than the comedies. There's also a like on both of these interviews, like they were for a documentary he's doing about himself, but he also ends it with like, say something nice about me, like not quite that blatant, but he's like, I would like you to give me a good wish. They'll just say something nice to him at the end of it. I don't know. I can't even imagine this level of confidence or this level of self-love that he displays here. It's just not my personality, but good for him. Next, we have an interview with the production assistant, Luciano Lucci. He relays the anecdote of his father, who worked as a producer and produced this film, like pulling him and his brother out of school to like go watch exploitation films that his company was producing just to see how they would play among people of his age group and demographic. He sounds like he had a more fun child or adolescence than I did. And then finally, we have an interview with Claudio Simonetti of Goblin. It's fucking sick. If you're a Goblin fan, this is a must-watch interview. You know, he discusses this film because he's being interviewed for it, but he discusses his career with Goblin overall, and he just says flat out, like, hey, we did not compose the score. The composer did, and then we just performed it and added our own kind of flavor and flourish to it. He kind of talks about what made the band disband back in the day, like the creative differences and the sort of inherent troubles that come from being a prog rock band and then being a film score band. And he offers a kind of a hot take. He says that Deep Red is better than Suspiria. I don't agree at all, but hey, that's cool. And that's it. That's the set. I recommend it a lot, actually, if you're a fan of these films. But even if you're not a fan of these films, if you go into it with the mindset that I've kind of delineated for you, I think I'll get something out of this. And this has made me want to retrace my steps and go back to the previous boxes and maybe even revisit Volume 5, although, I don't know, that one just didn't feel like it was for me. But maybe in the future, when they press that lovely single case slim edition, I'll pick it up, right? Okay, that's all from me today. If you'd like to support the work I do monetarily, there are links in the description for my Patreon, channel membership program, and Amazon wishlist. And if you'd like to support this channel non-monetarily, liking the video, commenting me lovely things to read, leaving me lovely comments to read, sharing it with a pal, and subscribing to the channel would all be just wonderful for me. And there are links in the description to my social media accounts, should you like to be a little bit more intimate. And until then, remember that Satan loves all of their children. Bye. I'd like to take a moment to thank our newest patrons, Craig Rogers, Jeremy Long, Zachary William, Kevin Tudor, Brent Madison, and Rachel. I'd also like to thank our accomplices Ann PM, Anthony Listro, The Boogeyman's Closet, Dana Jordan Rothschild, The Disconnected, Dr. Jeff Butcher, Dustin Putman, George Strang, Nosferatu 1334, Possessed Washing Machine, S. Butler, Sasha Bobashasaurus, and Stephen Perkins. If you'd like to be counted amongst their ranks, the link is in the description.